Hi, I'm Fred Havemeyer, Southampton Town Trustee, and we're here at Mecock's Cut. It's May 17th, 2012, in the middle of the day, and the cut was open at 9:30 this morning, and it's an extremely interesting process. The way it works is this. The machine operator in this case was Scotty, and he works for Steve Mezaneski Excavating, and first they dig the north end of the cut and make it nice and deep and wide there. As trustee, I've been in charge of opening the cut for the last 10 plus years, and it's a particular thrill and interest of mine to be able to come down here and open Mecock's Bay up to the ocean. The point being to clean out the bay, to drain the water out, and when the bay gets to be low, for the salt water to come in and exchange with it in order to make sure the bay waters are healthy, and also to keep the salinity up for the millions of dollars of oysters and soft clams that live in the bay. And then they move away from that area and they leave a dam or bridge about 10-12 feet wide to hold the waters of Mecock's Bay back so that they can dig the rest of the cut. The initial cut is about 1.5 buckets wide of the excavator. So with the dam in place, they dig the rest of the cut all the way down. Then go back up, knock out the dam, water starts to pour down. machine comes down. Opens it up to the ocean. And Mother Nature takes care of the rest. Rushing waters start to undercut the banks of the cut itself, and as they undercut the banks slough off and fall in, and it just gets wider and wider and wider. And what it really is, it's a fast time event of the Grand Canyon and the Colorado River. That took millions of years. This takes overnight. Now what we're looking for is, A, to let the water out of Mecox Bay, to reduce the volume in there, because people farm along the edges still and they don't want their fields inundated with water. But importantly, there are a number of houses now around Mecox Bay in the floodplain. They have cesspools and they have basements. So we have to be very, very on top of things to find a time when the bay is high, so it'll have enough water to push out, enough volume to push out, and also be very aware that people have houses with cesspools and basements and they're scared of being flooded. So it's a real ticklish deal, and usually we can hit it right on the money. If we get a serious tropical storm or something like that, then it's every man for himself. We just do the best we can. And then over time, 24, 36 hours, it will be anywhere from 60 to 120 feet wide, depending on the weather and the natural circumstances. Today we have a very successful opening. The camera will pan over there and show you how the cut is running out to beat the band. I look for an offshore wind, a moderate influence of the moon on the tides, and a high bay to open up the bay to make it a successful cut. And today we have all those have come together. We have a moderate swell in the ocean. I'd like to see it a little lower, a little softer swell, but it's not interrupting the bay at all, or the water running out of the bay. As you can see, there's a man crabbing there. This evening there will be all kinds of people down here fishing, and the bay, when it's going out, the water carries the bait fish, the minnows and such, out into the ocean, and attracts all the striped bass and bluefish and fluke and whatever. So it's going to be an exciting and very sporting moment for the people that live in this area. In addition, the trustees monitor Mecox Bay very closely. The Bay Constables once a week take salinity testings in 4 different areas of Mecox Bay, so that we can keep a handle on how the salt content in the water is going, because if it gets below 5 parts per thousand, the shellfish do not prosper, and the whole set of oysters and clams will die. So we regulate that very carefully, and that is one of the criteria I use in opening the bay. And what happens when we have rainfall and that type of thing, the fresh water carries down into the bay and dilutes the salt content. Right now we're around 10 parts per thousand. At the last 10, even 8.5, and it's an opportune time to open the bay. In addition, we're coming up on Memorial Day weekend, and we like to have the bay open before any holidays, and hopefully close down, or at least a moderate flow, so we don't run the risk of somebody drowning in the cut, specifically someone's small child. The gentleman that is in the flow of the cut right now is crabbing, and he just let a crab go that was undersized. 5 inches point to point is the legal size for a crab. When the trustees open the bay, it starts a river going from Mecox Bay into the Atlantic Ocean. And that river really completes the life cycle of many species. We just had some alewives pour out of here half an hour ago that came in with the last opening of mecox, completed their spawn and went out, same that they do in Alewife Creek into Big Fresh Pond in North Sea in Noyak. With the water running out, the crabs want to return back to the ocean. Many of the crabs that are going out of here now are she crabs that have eggs on them, and they're going out in the ocean to spawn. And many times we can see the crabs gathering before we open the cut at the north end, up at the other end of the cut, gathering, anticipating an opening happening. How they anticipate that, I don't know, but they certainly are in the area and they're ready to go out when we open it up. In the summer months, when we open up Mecox Bay, we'll have many, many people here crabbing. And it's a family recreation, and it's a wonderful food source for all the people involved. And that's really what the trustees are all about, is making sure that we have healthy resources, not only as a sustainable resource, but as something for recreational purposes. He has a keeper, and the gentleman obviously is going to take it home and have it for dinner. The crab, as everybody knows, boiled or steamed crab is an absolute delicacy, and it's one of those fruits of the sea that we all enjoy so much down here, as well as the finfish and the shellfish, the striped bass, the bluefish, and of course the oysters and the softer steamer clams. And if you were to come back very early tomorrow morning, between 4 and 6, you would have a whole line of fishermen here fishing for striped bass. Striped bass traditionally like to feed more in the nighttime hours than they do in the daytime hours, unless there's a blitz going on in the fall, and then they'll feed all day long. But this Mecox Bay situation with the cut open is an enormous recreational asset. In the summertime, in the July, August months, people actually call the trustee's office asking from the city and from Connecticut and New Jersey, asking when Mecox is going to be open, because they want to book hotel and motel reservations to be down here at that time, so they can come down to the beach and enjoy not only the fishing and the crabbing, but also when the cut is down and not running so hard, it's a wonderful little water park for kids in mattresses and tubes, going back and forth gently with the ocean. So it's a complete benefit to the town. Now, interestingly enough, this is not something that has just happened overnight. Mecox has been opened for many, many centuries, first by the Shinnecock Indians that lived here, and then the settlers opened it up for their own purposes. Many of the purposes were to drain the bay so the fields wouldn't be flooded. But it's a marvelous thing. It's a lot of fun to see and be a part of. I know that my participation as trustee, I spend many hours trying to figure out the right time, weather-wise, tide-wise, swell-wise, to open Mecox, and we have a very high rate of success recently because we really study. I study it very, very carefully. But it's a thrilling thing. It's something that the entire town appreciates. And again, Mecox Bay 20 some odd years ago was in very poor shape environmentally. The water quality was very bad, and there was a complete die-off in the bay, and the trustees ramped up their supervision, and in the present time we now have an extremely healthy bay and a resource that is burgeoning, in that the shellfish in the wintertime, the oysters and the soft clams are an enormous source of revenue to the baymen, and also a source of great pleasure to the recreational people that go in Mecox Bay to gather oysters and soft clams for their own home use. So it's a complete cycle, and it's something that we really like to share with all the people in the town. One of the telltale signs of a successful opening of the cut, and something that I look for within the first hour, is a set of rapids going up the cut, because that really tells the whole story in the velocity and the volume of the water going out, and whether the cut will be successful in getting through the first high tide. And as you can see, the rapids extend all the way up the midsection of the cut, and as you can also see, the banks are rapidly cutting with the velocity of the water and falling in. Now that sand, we come by tomorrow or tomorrow evening, that sand with the widening cut will all have fallen into the cut itself and gone out with the water and formed a shoal out in front of Mecox Bay. That shoal over time will be washed away by the ocean and carried down to the west, and will form new beach area to the west, or replenish the beaches to the west. But it's a fascinating natural process, and as you can see, it's in motion right now. One of the important things that I want to add on here is that during the winter months and the early spring months, we dig a very large volume of sand out of the interior backside of Mecox Cut. And that sand is sold to be used to replenish the beach and dunes of oceanfront homeowners' houses both east and west of here. But it's nice to get the income, and it's very helpful to the trustees who have a very small budget, but it serves a very important purpose in that it brings deep water close to the northern edge of the beach. And we don't get too close. We have a very safe margin in that line. But that enables us to get the successful cuts like we have here, with this water rushing out, because there's deep water right off the end of the north end, the top end of the cut, which gives the push and the velocity and the volume we need to have all the rapids that you're looking at now. It's very important to have a lot of velocity with the opening of the cut, because the stream of water has to get through the first high tide. What happens is, if you have a weak running cut, the high tide comes up and the waves and the ocean itself actually stop the movement of the water. They stop the cut from flowing. And that takes place for about an hour and a half at high tide. And when that happens, each wave as it comes deposits about a wheelbarrow full of sand in front of the cut. Now when the tide starts going out and the water moves back toward the ocean, there's a berm that is formed at the mouth of the cut, and it stops the water from being able to run out. So with a weak running cut, you have a very high likelihood of not getting through the first high tide. And that's why I'm very careful to put the weather circumstances, the tide and the moon and everything together, so we'll have a really fast running cut and it'll get through the first high tide. And there's a second thing. If you have a fast moving cut, it cuts the banks very rapidly and makes the cut wider and wider and wider all during the first day. And with the wider cut, you have a much bigger volume of water, and there's a reduced likelihood that the first high tide will be able to stop the flow. Interestingly, what happens when you have a fast-running cut like this is when the tide comes in, even if it's a high tide, it will actually run under the waves. And I know that because I've stood out there and you can feel the water pouring by you going out while the waves are pouring over the top. It's really intriguing. You have two bodies of water running in opposite directions at the same time. But right now we have a superb opening, and there's every likelihood that it will get through the first high tide. The ocean is actually laying down more and more during the day with the offshore wind, which is excellent. And it's a beautiful sight. It's really an exciting situation and scene to see Mother Nature here doing its thing. The whole cycle of Mecox being put in really good shape, and I'm just happy to be a trustee, to be here, to be in charge of it, because I really get a bang out of it. You can see right below us where I'm standing here at the mouth of the cut, there's an iron fence post sticking out of the sand. The trustees have a regulation of no iron fence posts to be used for beach sand fencing or any other purposes. We require only wooden fencing, and that's a perfect example of why we do. That fence post has been around for quite a while, and we will get it out of here before the cut sequence is completely finished. But the point is, if somebody steps on that, they'll be injured. If someone swimming ran into it, they'd be injured. If someone was driving, it would flatten their tires, and it's just a very hazardous situation. So it's particularly important that iron fence posts are not used on the beach. And there's a perfect example right there at the edge of Meacock's Cut. The gentleman in the black truck is the fishing guru from Bridgehampton. You saw Jim McLaughlin here earlier. He's the fishing guru from the other side. Well, we're here at Meacock's. It's the first day of the opening, and there were fishermen here earlier, but it's a little too early for the fish to have sensed that the cut is open. The bait is pouring out, the crabs are pouring out. Later on this afternoon, this evening, the fishermen will show up. The dynamics of that is when the wind is from the west toward the east, the fishermen will be on the easterly side because the bait and everything hooks around out of the bay toward the east. If the wind happens to be from the east, there's every likelihood that the fishermen will be on the west side. Is the most productive fishing, because with an easterly wind, the currents will carry the bait all toward the east. There'll be a pocket right out over here. At the same time, if it's a westerly wind, there'll be a pocket on the other side. So it's quite predictable, but that doesn't mean that it's sometimes the events happen to control themselves and the fish are on the opposite side. But generally, that's the way it works. We're here at the top end of the bay end of Meacock's Cut. It's May 17th, it's 2012. And I was talking earlier about the importance of having a deep and wide upper end to the cut, so the volume and velocity of the water would be available for the whole channel itself. So it would be able to not only empty the bay quickly, but also to form a very strong current of water that could get through the first high tide and the remaining high tides. As you can see up the channel at the end here, it goes very deep and wide right to the deep water at the far end. And that's what's crucial to having a good cut. And also, as you can see, the volume of water with the rapids and swirls and everything else that is going through here and carrying out the sand and deepening the cut and increasing the volume. So this has been an excellent opening by Mezaneski and Company, and they've been doing it for years, and once again they've done a superb job. Now, turning over on the other side over here, you can see it's only been 4 hours since the cut was opened, and you can see off on the side the rack line, or the area of accumulated, in this case it's pollen from the trees on land with an offshore wind here. There's like 15-18 feet to the edge of the water already in the shallow edge of the bay here. But then if you look on beyond, you'll see all the flats, and those flats are already being exposed by this very successful cut. But after 24 hours or even 48 hours, that out there to the north-northwest will be all exposed sand and dry beach. And it extends out a very, very long distance. But in the mid portion, you'll see a dark water area, and that's the area that we dug out this winter and late spring, sold the sand for $7.50 a cubic yard to be put back on the beach in front of homeowners' houses as dunes. We sold that sand, but it's nice to have the income, and the trustees are a small budget operation, so it absolutely helps. But the real function of it is that it has made a deep water area in access to the bay where we get the volume of water that is necessary to make this cut work. And if it wasn't dug out, we would have shoals running all the way out to almost the first third of the bay, and it's extremely difficult to get the cut to work when you have a very long and very narrow channel with all the friction against the water, and you get a slow meandering stream, and the ocean, the waves close it up time and again. So it's a whole functioning system here with deep water to the top end. It's dug out, the sand is sold, the money for the sand is used to help the trustees replace infrastructure and pay key salaries and reduce the impact on the taxpayers. And the enormous benefit is we have deep water close to the opening point itself, so we can get the volume we need in order to get a successful cut. And once again, I want to emphasize we have a very carefully construed line that we do not dig beyond. In other words, we definitely want to protect the beach sill so there won't be any danger of losing the beach at Mecox. So we keep it purposely on a line to the north of the beach area. Now we're looking down the cut toward the ocean, and you can see it's actually a beautiful view from my point of view. You can see the waves on down at the mouth of the cut, but also it's important to look along the edges and see the banks and see how they're sloughing off so rapidly. And as we were standing here getting geared up, they get undercut and they fall in, and then the water takes the sand that fell in away, and then they get cut again and they fall in more. So there's rapids all the way down, there's swirling water, the crabs are pouring out of here. Fisherman just pulled up. That's Joe Tyree from Bridgehampton, who's a very well-known fisherman on the beach. And it's just an absolutely beautiful sight. It's kind of like a celebration each time we open up the cut. I hope you all enjoyed our filming this for you, because it's a pleasure to bring it to everybody and give you some of the inside scoop on what makes Mecox work and what makes Southampton work, and also the participation of the Southampton Town Trustees.